This month I've chosen to talk about what Lisa Rankin, who is an MD, calls the radical self-care. And so that's our theme for October. Today's talk, in keeping with that, is the healing factor that can make all the difference. Ralph Waldo Trine once said, "Never affirm or repeat about your health what you do not wish to be true." Well, when I read that, I thought that's about the most powerful double negative I've ever heard. Ralph Waldo Trine was a philosopher, a mystic, a teacher, and author of many books. And he was one of the early mentors of the New Thought movement here in the Western Hemisphere. His writings had a great influence on many of the contemporaries of that time, including Ernest Holmes. Trine was a true pioneer in the area of life-transforming thought. No other New Thought author has sold more books, believe it or not, than he. His writings reaching far beyond New Thought circles out to the general public, which was something we were talking about earlier. And his books, bought and read by the general public, was without ever realizing that these thoughts were new thought or metaphysical thought. Have any of you heard of Ralph Waldo Trine? Well, then I don't need to ask the next question, which is, have you read any of his works? Well, and my own answer is no. I have not read any of his books. I heard of him many long years ago in Spirits in Rebellion, but only briefly and didn't pursue it. But now that I hear this, I shall, because I am infinitely curious about his influences. I do, however, want to do one thing, and that is to reorder his quote. Let me quote it for you again. "Never affirm or repeat about your health that which you do not wish to be true." And I want to change that to affirm in your health what you wish to be true. Actually, it's a lot less words and it's a lot more positive, and it's the direction we want to go. So you not only drop the negative, you drop the double negative. Now, obviously, Lisa Rankin has heard of Ralph Waldo Trine because she quotes him in her book, her latest book, Mind Over Medicine, which we talked about last week and which we'll talk about this week. It's in a chapter, however, in one of her chapters, however, that I would recommend you read after you read the rest of the book. This way, you've built up your positive self-expectancy sufficiently to be unswayed by the negatives in that chapter. And because that chapter is followed by a lovely chapter which is titled "The Healing Factor that can make all the difference." So that's the title of today's talk, "The Healing Factor that can make all the difference." And if you want to know the name of the chapter I'm suggesting you don't read until after you read the rest of the book, you'll have to get the book and read it to find out. So the items that I want to cover now from that chapter on the healing factor are actually a list that she has made for those who are in the practice of the healing arts. And I'm going to paint a broad brush for you when I talk about the healing arts that she refers to. That may be a doctor. That may be a nurse. That may be a hospice worker. That may be a psychologist. That may be a social worker. That may be a minister. That may be a family member. You see, that list is an open possibility because many can serve in the role of support in someone else's healing. That would be, then, a a positive influence or acceptance within your circle of life as you are experiencing a healing. The secret, not to you or me, because we already know this stuff, the secret is to keep in close contact with those who support our healing and avoid those who don't, which is also something we were talking about earlier in the service. When you walk into a room or into a group of people or into a situation and it doesn't feel right, there is negative energy there. There is the kind of energy that you no longer embrace. And so it feels foreign, it feels uncomfortable. It's time to leave. You do no damage by leaving, but you certainly protect and guard your own positive energy in having done so. So keep in close contact with those who support your healing and avoid those who don't, pure and simple. The only other thing that I would like to remind you before I go through this list is that healing is not something that's only related to physical illness or injury. Healing is something that addresses emotional, mental, and spiritual functions as well. It includes our negative or our fearful beliefs about prosperity, about love, about work, about artistic expression, about feelings, about worthiness, and any other things that you might add to or substitute in that list for yourself. Because we are always in the process of healing. It's just at different levels, at higher levels, at broader levels, we are becoming more that connection with our oneness that addresses all the positive right where we are in that moment. So here's Rankin's list of ways that healers, any one or more of that list that I gave you earlier, can amplify their art. The first one is listen. When somebody is explaining their issue, listen. And the second one is to open your heart. Not to accept that condition, but to accept the individual who is experiencing that. You see the difference? It's not to take on the illness or the fear or the false belief, but rather to recognize with empathy that this person has. The third thing when you are supporting someone's healing is to look into their eyes as the discussion is occurring, to look into their eyes. And here's another one that she lists, which I think is so interesting because it's a part of a medical practice she gave up. And that's to take your hand off the doorknob and sit down. And she explains in the book that when she was practicing medicine, with the famous 7-minute measurement on each appointment, that when she went in to see a patient, she never sat down, she never made eye contact, and she didn't realize, but she never took her hand off the doorknob. She stood at the door, talked to the patient, ready to escape. And one day a patient said to her, "I came to tell you what's really behind what I'm expressing as illness. I've worked on this for weeks to find a succinct way to tell you. I've practiced it with my husband, being clear in how I was explaining it. But she said, I can't do that today. And the reason is because you've got your hand on the doorknob." She said, "I never realized I did that until that moment." And it was like ka-ching. A huge light bulb went on for her. I am not here with my patients. I call myself a healer. I'm not. Now, we talk about those moments as almost scary because they are that moment of truth. When we have a BGO, right? A blinding glimpse of the obvious, and that was hers. A blinding glimpse of the obvious. Take her hand off the doorknob and sit down. The next point in her list of the ways that healers can amplify their art is to be present, which of course follows what I just talked about, that concept of I'm in the room, but where am I in mind? Am I making a list of all the things I need to do today? Am I thinking about the last confrontation I had that was perhaps not as positive as I would have liked? Am I making my grocery list? Where am I when I am in conversation with someone who is looking for support? And then here's something else she lists, which is an interesting one to be very careful with, and that is to offer healing touch. And for those who are in the healing arts, there is a great deal to be learned before one practices that. Because one must be empathetic, but not step over that line that is personal to the degree that the other person is offended by it or in fear because of it. So when we use healing touch, and there are many, we know, for example, up at North Hawaii Community Hospital, they have someone on staff who does that kind of work for inpatients. But it's by permission. So we always want to get permission to touch someone else. You'll notice that licensed practitioners in science of mind do not touch our clients while we are doing any kind of a session, and that's why. First of all, because it can be offsetting to the other person, and secondly, because there is nothing in my touch that is peculiar to the healing. The healing is in mind, not in touch. So the touch is for, in this case, for the other person to feel accepted, to feel more relaxed, to feel a sense of loving concern. But it's something to be done with a great deal of care and permission. So then the next thing that she says is really more for the medical person, or in our case, the licensed practitioner, and that is to invite the patient or client to be your partner. To be your partner. We talked about this last week when we talked about the 2 questions that she is encouraging the medical profession to ask of their patients. 1, what do you think is wrong with you? And 2, what do you think will heal it? And this relates to that in inviting the patient to be your partner. Inviting the individual on the part of the practitioner to have the client tell him or her, what do you think is the problem? And what do you need in order for that to heal? And then to guide that individual through a greater understanding of it. Here's the next one. This applies to all of us, whether we're in the healing arts or whether we are a partner to someone, a neighbor, a relative, whatever. Avoid judgment. Whatever we are experiencing this other person to be having happen in their lives, it's their life. It's not ours to judge. Now, if you are in conflict with it and don't feel that you can be a party to that, then excuse yourself from being a party to that. If you are a party to that, avoid the judgment. Number 9 is to educate rather than dictate. In the process of supporting someone as a partner in their healing, avoid dictating. You can make all kinds of statements that are educational in nature, and the individual, if he or she is ready, will learn from that. Don't be disappointed if they don't. They're just not ready yet. The next is to choose your words carefully and remain optimistic. You do sometimes hear from others who are having some kind of a negative experience, a lot of negative feedback. Remain positive, or absent yourself from the situation when that's not possible for you. Trust that individual's intuition when they begin to talk about what they think is behind it. In most cases, unless they have practiced science of mind as you have, they will talk about the effect. Recognize they're talking about what's expressing, not what's behind it. But you can know for them that what's behind that can be healed. And that's the important thing. Be respectful of other practitioners who are treating this person. Because especially here, there are a lot of alternative methods to medicine, per se, to religion, per se. Lots of possibilities. And many people try more than one. Some people try several. And there are a few people who try everything. What's the one common denominator on that? Reassure this individual, whether it's a friend, it's a patient, it's a client, it's a relative, whatever. Reassure them that they're not alone in this. And I don't mean by that that I'm in your misery with you. I'm here to support your healing in every way that I can. The next is to encourage stress release and to let your own presence relieve stress. So if you are talking with someone or you are with a medical professional and you sense the stress in them, it's impossible, short of leaving, for you not to pick up on that. And I'll say something more about that in a minute. But be aware that stress release is such a huge portion of any healing process. And then whenever you talk with someone else and they are explaining what's happening to them that is medically or emotionally or spiritually a burden for them, offer them what? A positive option. She calls it hope. We go beyond that. We go beyond that to faith. We go beyond that to trust. Trusting that there is a healing available. And then her parting comment on this was, no matter what the prognosis is, spontaneous remission is always possible. And if that sort of runs against your grain, read the book. Because she's got some incredible examples. They are actually recorded healings of spontaneous remission. So it's a lengthy list, but you know what? You're worth it. We're all worth it. Some of these items you can apply in your own behalf through the experience of healing, and just as importantly, you can expect, require, and obtain the application of them with whomever you choose as your medical care provider. If you are not getting this kind of support from your medical care provider, look around and find one that you do. You can expect, require, and obtain the application of these 15 points from your loved ones, from your friends, from your acquaintances, anyone in your cone of influence. Now, not all of these ideas exist or apply in every instance. You get to choose what responses you expect and who you expect them from. You are in charge of you and the healing of any condition that you are experiencing. You know, in many ways, it's like choosing the board of directors for the business of your life. So this list is in Dr. Rankin's book for you to refer to, and it'll also be on the YouTube recording of this talk. So the healing factor that can and does make the difference is the atmosphere, the energy, the culture, if you will, in which healing is occurring. And that's not limited to the medical arts. It occurs in every area of our lives. The difference, if there still is one, is that this has been largely absent from the medical arts. And we're part of generations of precious humans who have accepted that. However, I must remind us all, including myself, we're metaphysicians. Remember what that word means. A metaphysician is a philosopher whose area of study or expertise is metaphysics, the study of the fundamental nature of reality and existence itself. Meta means beyond or transcending. So metaphysical means that which lies beyond, underlies, or transcends the physical realm or world or reality. Not just off in space somewhere, but right here in today's world. So if you're curious and you're so inclined, if you go into the internet, to Wikipedia, for example, you can find that there are lists of metaphysicians going clear back to 300 to 400 BCE, right up to today, and the list is very lengthy. So this is ancient knowledge revisited, with the addition of scientific proof of its existence in today's world, and an increasing body of knowledge as to how it works. And we can use it. That was one of Ernest Holmes' favorite sayings. He would say, there's a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. Well, folks, here's one of those powers. There's a power for good health in the universe, and we can use it. And because you're using it on your precious self, you can choose who, how, and why those around you honor and support you. So these ideas that Dr. Rankin brings forth are not new, far from it. And she's not the first in the modern era to do so. She stands on the shoulders of such metaphysicians as Phineas Quimby, Charles Fillmore, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Emmett Fox, H.B. Jeffrey, Joel Goldsmith, Catherine Ponder, Louise Hay, Norman Cousins, Bernie Siegel, and the list goes on and on. And next week, if you're so inclined, bring in some of the names that you've read, studied, followed in the evolution of your own unfolding as a practitioner of these healing arts. You will find many of them in this book, Dr. Rankin's book, and in Spirits in Rebellion, which I referred to earlier, and you'll find an increasing number writing, speaking, practicing, and living these very principles. In Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind teaching, in our unabridged statement of principles, is this statement: we believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through a power or through a universal mind, which is the law of God, and that we are surrounded by this creative mind, that energy that I referred to earlier, which receives the direct impress of our thought and acts upon it. We believe in the healing of the sick through this power of mind, and the control of conditions through this power of mind. So you see, this keeps coming down through word of mouth, through writings, and through actual living experiences down through history. And that statement of principles, incidentally, in its unabridged form, is always listed in its entirety in the monthly Science of Mind magazine under the header, What We Believe. So it's there for you to refer to, and it's there for you to point out to others. If you're not quite comfortable that you're getting all the words right, they're right there. Larry Dossey, who is a current day mind-body medicine pioneer, has been quoted as saying, "We focus on what the conventional world knows, and we honor it. But more besides that. Spirituality, meaning, purpose, consciousness, compassion, empathy, and love." In his book, Healing Words, which came out in 1993, I'm sure when this book was published, that his words may have at that time been close to heresy in medical circles, not so much anymore, but he said this: "I decided that not to employ prayer with my patients was the equivalent of deliberately withholding a potent drug or surgical procedure. I simply could not ignore the evidence for prayer's effectiveness." So when we talk about the healing factor that can make all the difference, what it comes down to is the belief of the individual being healed. And a part of that, now coming from the medical profession as well as from the metaphysical profession, I simply cannot ignore the evidence for prayer's effectiveness. And so it is.